All right. Hello, Team Schrader 2020. I've got somebody special on with us today. As I shared with you last week, one of my husband's my brother-in-law, lost his battle with alcoholism. And I just thought with all the messages and all the contacts that I received about other people that are struggling or has someone that is really struggling with COVID-19, or they've had the loss of someone they love as a result of substance abuse and mental health disorders. What do we do? Where do we go? The first thing and the first person that came to my mind was my friend Brett Bramble, who I met a few years ago, and he's got quite the story of how to navigate through this darkness. So, Brett, welcome. I'm just so thrilled and honored that you're willing to come on and share with all of our listeners and our watchers all of the wisdom that you've gained from personal experience and personal knowledge. So, just you know what's happening in the community. You have your fingers on the pulse of the struggling and the people that are trying to heal from not only their struggle with substance abuse and mental health disorders, but also loving someone and then losing someone to these diseases. So just start from the beginning and just share your wisdom with us this morning.
I'm happy to do that, and very honored as well. And thank you for taking people like me and letting us share our stories for others that it may benefit. I'm going to kind of breeze through the early version of my story. But we moved from Tucker to Gwinnett, and I was about 10 years old. And so I spent from third grade all the way through high school in the Parkview cluster with a very large, loving family, just everything set up to be a great life. Unfortunately, I did experience some very traumatic or very devastating childhood trauma at the age of 12 that stayed ongoing throughout my adolescent and teen years. And due to that, and maybe some other things, rebellion just became my purpose in life. And unfortunately, I was using hard drugs almost every day at the age of about 16 and 17, as early as that. You can't maintain that very long without getting in some trouble, and I did. I got into some trouble, and thankfully, it woke me up enough to start the process of working on rebuilding rather than going deeper in the hole. So I went through all of those traumatic experiences. It was a really tough struggle, really was. Early 20s were just a nightmare. And then the rest of my 20s were pretty much spent rebuilding all of that stuff. But I managed to work it out. You know, I got to back to the line that I wanted to, even playing field. I was out of the tunnel and back on the level playing field, back to where I could start growing and doing something special. But at that point, after going through all this and getting myself back in a good place in life, this is when my sister Brittany, my closest sister to me, she came to me and she was really struggling with opioids, which for me, having gotten out of it so early, I didn't have a huge connection with, and I had been avoiding drugs and people had used them for so long for my own recovery that I almost forgot what it was like to be in that. So trying to offer her help as a big brother and somebody who loves her genuinely, I did the best I could, but we learned pretty quickly and abruptly that it was heroin that she was using, and our family was not ready for that. I wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. Nobody in our family knew what to do. And we just didn't have the resources to do. We tried, we did everything we could, but unfortunately, March 15th of 2014, a little over 6 years ago, my sister lost her life to a heroin overdose. Just suddenly, abruptly, unexpectedly. She was really doing well. And was the most amazing person in the world. the fact that she's not here and I'm here, it doesn't make sense to anybody who knows me and her. It really doesn't. And it was total devastation to me. My entire family as well. But to me, all of my grandparents were still living at the time. And I had just never had a real experience with grief. And to lose the closest person in the world your first time, just a shock to my system. And it changed everything, as any loss does. It changed everything in an instant. And I was devastated. Didn't know how I could go on. But shortly after this, in the haze of total shock and the occasional wave of reality that just knocks you to your knees, through that process, I found that sharing a positive message in her honor was the only good thing I could get out of this, and the only good feeling that I could have at that time, in that true grief early on, especially from something so traumatic where, there is a certain bit of shame and a certain bit of guilt with substance-related deaths. Once it happens to you, you kind of get over that stuff, but there are people who still carry that and stigmatize it. And it's a part of the healing process is to learn to cope with that.
Well, and also as a surviving family member, you struggle with, did I do enough? Could I have done more? And then there's those, in your situation as well, what I've heard is that when you've also struggled with substance abuse and you're coming out of it, you sort of have a layer of survivor's guilt. And so it's just so complicated, but you have found a strategy to navigate all of these dark waters.
That's right. And it started with, like I say, just the desire to continue her message of love that she was spreading to the world, and just take her heart and just try to live through, bring her heart through me to others, and just try to uplift others, help others. And I got out, I got into the community and went to any event regarding addiction, recovery, overdose. This was back in 2014 and when it wasn't really talked about much. So anything that came along, I was there. I was there early. I'd stay late. I'd shake hands with everybody. That's how I got to meet Judge Schrader. Just being involved in the community and showing up everywhere and telling this story. And it started there. And then eventually just being involved with other organizations, helping raise money for organizations that help things that would have mattered to Brittany. All that stuff just helped. And I grew up off of it and kept going and kept going. And then I had this wild idea one night that I should walk across the country in her honor. And I know that sounds insane, and it did to me as well, but it hit me in my heart. It wasn't a thought that was going to go away like, let me buy a saxophone and forget how to play it in 6 months. This was real, and I was scared because I'd never done anything like this, and I knew it would be a big challenge, but I knew she would love it, and it was just right for me at that time. I mean, I think sometimes we all just need to take a long walk. So it worked out. So I spent a bit of time preparing and promoting this walk and getting the word out about it and getting myself ready. And then 2 years, on the anniversary of her 2 years, angelversary we call it, I stepped my foot into the Atlantic Ocean and walked for 8 months across the country until I got to the Pacific. And the entire experience was, one, incredible, and two, just moving. From the very beginning, I showed up and there were 30 people there before me who I'd never met before. They just heard about this. They had somebody in their family that they lost, and they were there to support me, bringing gifts and donations and love and hugs. And that never went away from before I took the first step all the way through the end. The kindness of others, whether they were affected or not, absolutely amazing. Being able to experience that in our country was just quite the experience, and
And the
changed me.
crowd grew as you made your way across the country.
It sure did.
I followed that walk and your subsequent walk as well.
Yeah, and that's right. And because 2016 was an election year, if you remember, and it was opioid crisis became the key words for the media, and so I was able to get a lot of coverage, and that message got spread pretty far, and people would see it, reach out to me, and show up, and just and have the most heartfelt, emotional conversations on the side of the road. Here I am living out of a jogging stroller, more or less, and just having really deep connection with total strangers through our pain, which was very real and healing in a lot of ways. Also emotionally demanding. I think I had to take more emotional days off than I did physical days. It was a tough journey, but it was so great, and I gained so much out of it. Not, especially in hindsight, but I remember specifically, and this was a key moment in that first walk. I had gotten all the way across, almost 3/4 of the way, and I was in Nevada. They call it Nevada, and I'm out there, and I chose to use Highway 50, U.S. Highway 50. And in Nevada, it's this one highway goes from, border to border across the state, and there's only 6 towns on the whole state. So it's known as the loneliest highway in America is what it's known as. And so for me, it was 5 or 6 days between towns. So I'm literally moving with 5 or 6 days worth of food or water and my camping supplies, and just camping and living in the desert. I mean, it was actually phenomenal. And especially by that point in my walk, I was experienced and equipped enough to be able to handle that. But to be able to sleep and connect, with the earth and an inch off of the ground, and just see every star in the universe at night, and just feel the wind and the sun and the changes, and watch all that and connect to all that, it really just brought you to a interesting state of mind. And I was out there one day, and I was walking up just up a mountain range. It's kind of mountains and valleys. I was walking up a slope. I look out to the left, and I could see wild horses, and it was just stunning. It was beautiful. And then I saw, so it just taking in the whole scenery. It was just a beautiful moment. And then I glanced down at my handlebar on the cart, and there was sorry about that. I had a picture of the keychain, a keychain of a picture of my sister's face. And it was the first time in over 2 years that I saw a picture of her face and didn't feel sadness. That was a pivotal moment for me, and I knew it. And I stopped dead in my tracks and just took this moment in, and came to tears, and realized it was then that I realized, of course I miss her every day, and I hate that she's not here, but I still have her love. I still know what it feels like to be loved by my sister. I still know what it feels like to love my sister, and that has never changed. And it's been over 6 years now, and that is still a feeling that I have. I still have love and memories, and I'm so grateful for them. And to be able to get to that place in your grief takes time, but that was I don't know if I really needed to do that walk to get there, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I was able to have that experience. From there, the rest was bonus. It was for everybody else. And I got back home after doing that walk, and because it was so successful in the things that I set out to do, I planned and decided to do another one. And this time a little more organized, a lot more experience gained, so I could focus on more reach and more engagement with communities and leaders of communities, from city to state to federal. So we were connecting with people across the board. So we did the second walk in 2018, this time with a group of people. It ended up being me and a man named Stick, who completed the entire East Coast this time. So we started in Key West and went all the way to the top of Maine. And one quick story from that walk, again, the same things, just one, amazing experience. Two, kindness of others, just out this world. And three, just the amount of pain in this country due to substance use and addiction is mind-boggling and needs to be addressed. But a story of hope through this walk in South Carolina. There was a family who had heard about us through social media, and they reached out and offered their home to me and my walking partner, Stick. And we came into their home. They had lost their son, and I met Jessie, who was the young man's sister. So she lost her brother. I had lost my sister, and she was just kind of fascinated with the walk. So her and I just had a cool connection through all that stuff. And sort of stayed in touch. But months later, and she was also in recovery. She had almost a year in recovery at that point. So we just connected on a lot of different ways. A few months later, I was up Massachusetts, New England area, and I get a phone call from her, and she had a recurrence of symptoms in her addiction and was going off track really fast. And she had been into treatment centers multiple times. The first couple times were bad situations with the Southern Florida treatment centers, and she just didn't want to go back to a treatment center at that time. And she asked if she could join the rest of our walk. And I'm like, absolutely, I'd love to have you, but we're two grown men who have been walking for 6 months, 20 miles a day for 6 months straight, and we're on a schedule, so we have to maintain that. So jumping in and doing that level was going to be a challenge, but I told her that it was possible, and I showed her ways that she could do it and a list of things that she needed to get. She did it all. She showed up on time, ready to go, ready to fight for her life, and that's what she did. She finished the last 300 miles with us in the heat of summer in northern Maine, hills, mountains, blisters on her feet, fighting through it all, keeping up with us, and just absolutely amazing to watch, absolutely amazing to coach her through that. I learned a lot from her, and we finished the walk at the top of Maine, at the Maine-Canada border, in this little town called Fort Kent. And we had the whole town out. It was this huge celebration. It was quite amazing. And she saw the success that this can do, and the hope, and the whatever it can, the education it can provide to communities along the way. And she wasn't ready to go home. So she came up to me and she's like, you know what? Can you bring me back to the place that I started? And then I'm going to continue south and keep this mission going. So Jessie, this young girl who came out and followed us, then started there and walked all the way back to Key West on her own, maintaining her recovery, spreading this message of hope. She made it. It was amazing. It was such a challenge for her. Again, kindness of others and support really helped her grow. And now she's, she's doing great right now, and it's just the most amazing thing. And to be able to do that and see this affect others, and like her walk impacted so many people. And it just, when you can give that to your sister or her brother or whoever those losses are along the way that motivate you, that carry you, it just fills your life with a purpose out of total tragedy. And that's the answer.
You mentioned that the first walk was really to help heal your pain and walk through your grief.
And I didn't know that at the time, but yes.
Well, but just listening to the way you've described this, and now the second walk was more of driving the purpose that you feel now, of building awareness, of sharing your message of hope, both as a survivor of substance abuse disorder, disease, and as a survivor of losing someone to the disease and being able to navigate that grief. So, and I know that you are facilitating some support groups to help some families to really also navigate their journey of grief and hopelessness. So share a little bit about what's happening with that.
Right. So when I finally got home from living life without walls for so long, I settled back in and started a grief support group. It's a chapter of a larger nonprofit called GRASP, which stands for Grief Recovery After a Substance Passing. So I opened a chapter that we call it Grasp Gwinnett, and it takes the groups normally are facilitated at the Navigate Recovery Gwinnett Safe Harbor location. They're kind enough to provide space for us to have these support group meetings. And we have siblings, mothers, fathers, friends, cousins, anybody who has lost a loved one to a substance-related passing. We all come together and share what we're going through and do it together so we don't feel so alone, so we can have a place to scream, have a place to cry. We even laugh in there. It's quite an amazing group. Right now we were just on hold, but starting in May, we're going to do the Zoom meetings. We were finally able to get approved to do that. So you can email graspgwinnett@gmail.com if you're interested in attending these grief support group meetings. And they are we just try to keep it exclusive to people who have lost a loved one to substance-related passings because of the certain stigmas associated with it. But there are also many other support groups for stuff across the board as well. And I recommend, the one thing I can say after all this is that the more work you put into your grief, the more you're going to get out of it. I mean, it's a life-changing thing and a pain that you will always have. Right. It's a pain you will live with forever. But adapting to that change and learning to live with that pain is a process. And the more work you put into it, the smoother that process will be.
And there's lots of support, and there's lots of people out there that can walk this journey with you. So I think one of the primary messages that you have about this morning is that you are not alone. That even though there's a lot of stigma surrounding substance abuse and mental health disorders right now in this present day, there's still a lot of resources. There's so many people who are struggling with this. And as you know, one of the things that I've tried to advocate for is lifting the shame, sharing the story, because the more that we share our stories, the more people hear the message of hope, and then the more people can be rescued out of the grief and rescued out of the darkness, and just really turn their pain into purpose like you have.
Yes, and to go off of that, it also helps you when you can own your story and share it. It helps you grow and heal. As well as others. It's a win-win, but it's hard to do, and you do that at your own time.
Okay, so and you are now one of our heroes in this COVID virus. You are driving all over the place. You are a truck driver right now, right?
I am a truck driver that delivers goods to Walmarts all over the Southeast. I don't know how I got into this position, but I'm very honored and thankful to, one, have a job, and two, to be able to do something that does serve others. And for me, that job is just half of what I'm doing. And the rest of what I'm doing is I've opened a nonprofit called Freedom to Grow, and we are acquiring hiking and camping gear right now. And we're going to be doing multi-day hikes for vacation and wellness purposes for people in recovery. We're also thinking of doing grief-based wellness hikes.
Wonderful. Okay.
So these are things we're looking forward to over the next couple of years.
Well, I love it. I love it that you're taking all of the things that you learned on your walk on how to heal, and then you've turned that experience also into a mechanism where you can offer that experience to others to get out. It's clear based on best practices, data, and scientific evidence that nature heals.
Right.
A psychologist across the board talk about getting outside, making sure you're connecting with nature, whether it's in the mountains or on the beach. That is really soothing for the soul and soothing for the spirit. So good for you. Good for you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Well, all right. Anything else you'd like to share?
No, that's it. I appreciate you having me on here, and my heart is with you and your family as we go through this.
Yes. Well, I just knew that you'd have a lot of information to share with everyone that's struggling in our community. I say all the time, there's not a family that has not been touched by this in one form or another.
Yeah.
And it's important, I think, for all of us to be authentic and transparent and share our struggles as well as our success. And I know, and you know, that grief is a heavy blanket to wear all by yourself. Regret is a heavy blanket to wear all by yourself. And it's important for us to know that there's a community of support out there. There's organizations that are supporting us out there. And I appreciate you turning your experience, your painful experience, into such a purposeful, hope-filled organization, message, and you know, you're just doing so much good for everybody out there, Brett, that's struggling, and I appreciate that.
Well, same to you. I appreciate you and all the good you're doing for everybody as well.
Okay. Well, you take care, be safe out there on the roads, and know that we all appreciate you making sure that Walmart is well stocked with everything that we need right now.
That's right.
Okay. Stay healthy.
Yeah,
Okay.
you too. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.